Hello. In today's presentation, I will be discussing poetry's reflections of life and how writers portrayed their views of the world through their writing. My name is Rebekah Mogg. I am a 17-year-old avid reader and writer. In this presentation, I will be discussing poems by Emily Dickinson and Gwendolyn Brooks. I will look into how these writers portrayed their views of the world through their poetry. The first writer is Emily Dickinson. Dickinson was born on December 10, 1830. Despite being one of the most well-known writers in history, she wrote because she loved to and not for fame. And after she died in 1886, almost 1,800 poems that she had written were discovered. These poems were edited and published in the following years. The following is one of Emily Dickinson's poems titled "Fame is a Fickle Food." Fame is a fickle food upon a shifting plate, whose table once a guest but not the second time is set, whose crumbs the crows inspect and with ironic claw flap past it to the farmer's corn. Men eat of it and die. Emily Dickinson's poem, Fame is a Fickle Food, provides insights of her opinions about fame. Dickinson seemed to believe that fame, something that so many people constantly are striving for, is a toxin that causes anyone who partakes of it to wither away and die. The second author is Gwendolyn Brooks. Gwendolyn Brooks was born in 1917 and died in the year 2000. She began publishing poems at 13 years old and was frequently getting poems published by 17. She wrote poems about Black heroes and wanted to maintain her people's cultural identity. She wanted to write meaningful poetry and inspire people through her writing. The following is Gwendolyn Brooks's poem titled "The Life of Lincoln West." Ugly is the little boy that everyone ever saw. That is what everyone said. Even to his mother it was apparent when the blue-aproned nurse came into the northeast end of the maternity ward, bearing his squeals and plump bottom looped up in a scant receiving blanket, bending to pass the bundle carefully into the waiting mother hands, that this was no cute little ugliness, no sly baby waywardness that was going to inch away as would baby fat, baby curl, and baby spot brush. The pendulous lip, the branching ears, the eyes so wide and wild, the vague, unvibrant brown of the skin, and, most disturbing, the great head. These components of that look bespoke the sure fiber, the deep grain. His father could not bear the sight of him. His mother high-piled her pretty dyed hair and put him among her hairpins and sweethearts, dance slippers, torn paper roses. He was not less than these, he was not more. As the little Lincoln grew ugly upward and out, he began to understand that something was wrong. His little ways of trying to please his father, the bringing of matches, the jumping aside at warning sound of oh so large and rushing stride, the smile that gave and gave and gave, unsuccessful. Even Christmases and Easters were spoiled. He would be sitting at the family feasting table, really delighting in the displays of mashed potatoes and the rich, golden, fat crust of the ham, or the festive fowl, when he would look up and find somebody feeling indignant about him. What a pity, what a pity! No love for one so loving. The little Lincoln loved everybody. Ants, the changing caterpillar, his much missing mother, his kindergarten teacher, whose concern for him was composed of 1 part sympathy and 2 parts repulsion. The others ran up with their little drawings, he ran up with his. She tried to be as pleasant with him as with others, but it was difficult, for she was all pretty, all daintiness, all tiny vanilla, with blue eyes and fluffy sun hair. One afternoon she saw him in the hall looking bleak against the wall. It was strange, because the bell had long since rung, and no other child was in sight. Pity flooded her. She buttoned her gloves, and suggested cheerfully that she walk him home. She started out bravely, holding him by the hand, but she had not walked far before she regretted it. The little monkey, must everyone look, and clutching her hand like that, literally pinching it. At 7, the little Lincoln loved the brother and sister who moved next door, handsome, well-dressed, charitable often to him. They enjoyed him because he was resourceful, made up games, told stories. But when their more acceptable friends came, they turned their handsome backs on him. He hated himself for his feeling of well-being when with them, despite everything. He spent much time looking at himself in mirrors. What could be done? But there was no shrinking his head. There was no binding his ears. "Don't touch me!" cried the little fairy-like being in the playground. Her name was Nerissa. The many children were playing tag, but when he caught her she recoiled, jerked free, and ran. It was like all the rainbow that ever was, going off forever, all the sparkling in the sunset west. One day, while he was yet 7, a thing happened. In the downtown movies with his mother, a white man in the seat beside him whispered loudly to a companion and pointed at the little Link. "There! That's the kind I've been wanting to show you. One of the best examples of the species. Not like those deluded Negroes you see so much of on the streets these days, but the real thing. Black, ugly, and odd. You can see the savagery, the blunt blackness. That is the real thing." His mother, her hair had never looked so red around the dark brown velvet of her face, jumped up, shrieked, "Go to!" She did not finish. She yanked to his feet the little Lincoln, who was sitting there staring in fascination at his assessor, at the author of his new idea. All the way home he was happy. Of course he had not liked the word ugly, but after all, should he not be used to that by now? What had struck him, among the words and meanings he could little understand, was the phrase "the real thing." He didn't know quite why, but he liked that. He liked that very much. When he was hurt, too much stared at, too much left alone, he thought about that. He told himself, "After all, I'm the real thing." It comforted him. The Life of Lincoln West told the story of a young boy who looks abnormal. Lincoln's story also seems to show a little bit of empathy to people who are trying to stand with outcasts. While the kindergarten teacher was obviously uncomfortable walking with Lincoln, she still tried. I think that Gwendolyn Brooks created the character of the kindergarten teacher to show that it is still appreciated when someone steps out of their comfort zone to help someone who might otherwise stand by themselves. I think Gwendolyn Brooks was trying to encourage her readers at the time to stand with the outcasts, at the time African Americans, no matter how uncomfortable it made them. Because it is simply the act of standing with someone who otherwise would stand by themselves that is appreciated, and it makes them realize that they are not alone. So how did Emily Dickinson and Gwendolyn Brooks portray their views of the world through their writing? What about their lives showed through their poetry? Well, when reading about Emily Dickinson, I learned that she wrote because she loved to write and actually harbored bitter feelings towards publication. In 1863, she wrote a poem that contained the line, "Publication is the auction of the mind of man." She believed that publication stole mind and spirit from man. When I reread Fame is a Fickle Food, I had a new appreciation for Dickinson's convictions. I could infer from the poem that Dickinson knew that she could be famous, but would rather live a quiet life with full possession of her mind and soul than partake of toxic fame. As for Gwendolyn Brooks, the end of the life of Lincoln West has a whole new meaning to me after reading about her. I think that in the poem, much of Lincoln's life was spent looking at how he was inferior to others. Brooks's goal in her writing was largely to encourage African Americans to embrace who they are, and I could see Lincoln doing just that in the end of this poem. By embracing who he was and not how he wasn't like the next person, Lincoln stopped trying to be fake. He stopped trying to be someone he wasn't, and instead he chose to be real. Gwendolyn Brooks seemed to want to encourage similar acceptance in her readers. She even made an example of herself by fully embracing her identity and becoming the first African American to receive a Pulitzer Prize. The following slides are the resources I used in the creation of this presentation. I hope that you enjoyed my presentation. Have a wonderful week.